So I've watched a historical drama, which apparently was pretty accurate. I mean, apart from some tiny details and subsequent events and such, seem to be quite accurate. Of course, I always research after watching movies based on history and such, or general real life events. And yeah, it seems to be it's about Botswana, the history of Botswana, which I knew very little about before. So by no means am I knowledgeable about this, but I mean I just read about it just a bit. What I could read in a bit over an hour. So however much I could read in an hour. So I mean, beyond that, I'm not really knowledgeable. Beyond the movie, so in total, 3 hours or so. But before, I mean, I really didn't know much about it at all. Beyond, well, just generally what just generic sort of knowledge of African countries, but really I knew more about Zimbabwe than I knew about Botswana, its neighbor, and more about South Africa, of course, being one of the largest countries. Yeah. But yeah, I didn't even know it was called what it was called before it became Botswana. So that's yeah, something. Uh, so yeah, this movie called United Kingdom, which is a very ironic title, really, because the last thing they were was United. So very ironic. One has got to admit. I'm not sure if the irony was intended there. Obviously, they're referring more to with regards to um, the couple themselves than the kingdoms, really. But you know, with regards to the kingdoms, yeah, they weren't united whatsoever. And it's interesting to know about this, everything that's happened, but also frustrating at the same time. Kind of like when I watched commented on um, what was it called again? In the name of our Father, yeah. That with regards to the with regards to Ireland this time, not Botswana. Uh, yeah. To be fair, that's even well, it's more of a personal, individualized account of injustice. This was more of a mm, international sort of thing, but the fact that states can be so oppressive, it's unbelievable, really. I just how this is, and this even that incident in Ireland, this all happened after the UN was formed. It's not like the UN has much power, really, and what it does have, it's given by the countries. So countries volunteer to do something and such. So it doesn't effectively have, but there really, really should be some sort of standard of human rights that are really adhered to. Surely, there is obviously ICC court and such, but it's very rarely really utilized, and only in the most extreme cases it is. And yeah, and just somebody should have been prosecuted over the fact they jailed innocent people, as with the Irish case. And people should, in this case, they just blatantly lie, just lie here. And as usual, with many reports nowadays as well, just yesterday there was a report that was just leaked because it was previously suppressed. I mean, frankly, I have no idea why they even commission reports if they don't even want to publish them. Of course, in this case, this report with regards to this Botswana incident. Of course, this was before it was Botswana. It only became Botswana after they held the elections, and he became the first president. Uh, but yeah, with regards to this incident, they, they, they they not only suppressed the report but lied about it, and it's just horrid. And the Jack Davenport's character, by the way, uh, is quite. I mean, he first came to my attention in Pirates of the Caribbean, obviously, as I'm assuming many people also have the experience of him. That is, and I mean, to be fair, he doesn't have that much screen time there. But yeah, what he does have, he's more sort of comically, fallibly devious there, as opposed to just awfully devious as he is here. And but sure enough, he manages to be worse. Effectively, in this, of course, this is a real life case, as opposed to what is fiction, really, with Pirates of the Caribbean, obviously. Although I wouldn't mind a real life mermaid to have existed, or a giant, well, kraken, yes, or a was she Medusa? She looked like Medusa. Anyway, yeah, that's Pirates of the Caribbean there. I think he was the only actor from there that acted here. And another bizarre thing, though, is Draco Malfoy's actor, who I didn't recognize at all. I didn't. I cannot say I did. I only read it after I read just a bit of his biography. I just usually read a paragraph or so about every character, just to see every actor of this, just to see if they did anything else that I have also seen them in. Not that I care too much about actors, I really don't, but it's kind of interesting to see people change and whatnot. In this case, sure enough, I didn't recognize him at all. And wow, what do you know? He played a villain again. This time, of course, a real life villain. But it's quite something. It seems like he's typecasted as a villain now, apparently. Because clearly well, he began as a villain, although, a child villain, really. He wasn't the main villain in Harry Potter, obviously. But yeah, it's quite interesting how some people are typecasted, somehow. Davenport himself, he had a very similar character in Pirates of the Caribbean. Sort of, the stereotypical sort of, I didn't quite understand who he was supposed to represent. I don't think there was an article I could read, I could click to, about the actual, because I didn't understand. I'm assuming he was a sort of civil servant because after the election he seemed to have still been in place, unless he was just about to leave. In which case, civil service does usually typically go through governments, not immediately at least replaced. But so yeah, don't quite understand though, because he played such a malevolent character, really, that it would be very difficult to imagine the civil service doing that. Usually civil service is supposed to be neutral. That's where he wasn't neutral, really. So yeah, let me check, I suppose, because really, I'm assuming he was a politician. I mean, here it says he was a government representative. But no, apparently he was a fictional character here for some reason. I have no idea why the hell. And they introduced a fictional character then. I mean, most weren't fictional, as far as I know. I really have no idea why this guy was. I'm assuming just so people could maybe project their sort of odiousness on a fictional character. I don't know. What's the point? So yeah, he didn't exist. That's something. Um, yeah. Other than that, though, it was interesting. It was interesting. Apparently, Tom Felton's character is fictional as well, so they really wanted to go all the way to fictionalize villains. In fact, I mean, they only showed that they didn't even bother with an actor for Churchill at all, and not sure why. Anyway, I mean, everyone I suppose knows who Churchill was, but you know, it was quite a disappointing revelation, really, as to what happened in real life. Disappointing that this was a Labour government that initially did this, just purely for mainly, it seems, economic reasons. It shouldn't happen for economic reasons. Um, but obviously, Churchill was beyond devious, really. I mean, if he actually did that for real, just say, "Oh yeah, he won't be banned for 5 years." Nope, but only says that he will be banned for life after the election. Isn't that great? That's like the ultimate politician trick, isn't it? Of course, after the election, they cannot do anything about it. And, it's so yeah. Um, the whole thing is just you, one almost wonders whether I mean uh, if this happens in what is nominally a democratic country, then I mean, how much worse can it be if a country's in? I mean, that's the bizarre thing. I mean, obviously it's just random, but it's kind of random in democratic countries as well. But in this way, there is no guarantee that an autocratic country is any worse than a democratic country when it comes to human rights and such, or civil rights generally. And you know what? I don't generally watch anything to do with loyalty. I couldn't give a damn, honestly. Um, I mean, I'm not going to just go and eagerly watch The Crown or anything. That's absolute nonsense, you know. Um, but this was interesting in terms of how interesting relationships can be. This was interesting. In terms of most romance movies, most romantic movies that is, that I sometimes watch. This was certainly more interesting than most because, of course, it involved national affairs and such, and political conflicts, and and it's also a real life history. So whatever. Um, but so I mean, it's just it was interesting, but it still wasn't. I mean, it didn't seem like it was something that could really be. I don't know. It's not a feel good story per se. I mean, it's history. Not much in history is feel good. So I'm just saying, I mean, I don't go in every movie to feel positive about the movie. I don't. Uh, but let's just say, I watched more of documentary, kind of like Green Book. Green Book is also it's kind of similar. It doesn't involve national things. It's more personalized, kind of like in the sense, in the name of my father, it's personalized injustice and such. But Green Book is sort of more similar to this, except just different sort of relations and such. But um, yeah, these kind of movies really, though one cannot say one enjoys them, just cannot. It doesn't mean, of course, that the movies aren't well made, well done, or such, well acted, you know. This was, generally, all three were well acted, but and well done, and cinematography was well and such, but uh, they cannot really be enjoyed. Not like a romantic story like with this is more of a rom-com than so but like you've got Mail that I watched recently. I mean, obviously it's fictional, which is makes it easier to make positive, but um, obviously it's easier to enjoy though. I mean, sure, because it's fictional, but it's just easier in the sense of what happens. Now, by the way, with regards to the director, I had never actually heard of her before. She hasn't actually directed many movies so far, but this is the first one that I watched for her. Then, but yeah, what's strange is that this, despite doing this, I don't know what the other movies are about, so I cannot really generalize in this sense. I've only watched literally just this one movie directed by her. But if she does generally do this sort of, I mean, direct these sort of movies, and she seems to have wanted to make a statement by releasing it when they had their independence anniversary and such. Even though saying this, they seem to have goofed on a few historical facts, as I read in on IMDb list, yeah. And but the point is, I think, I mean, I'm not sure, it can directly be connected in the sense, but it is somewhat connected. Now, it doesn't. I'm not sure she is much more active right now, but she seems to have um, subscribed, if that is the verb to use, to an ideology, if that is also a way to describe it, of oppressors, right? Practically, at, at least just one, it seems. I mean, one facet of this, or well, I mean, still, it's still sort of an ideology in itself. It doesn't generally, but it is an ideology of oppression as well, and she seems to have subscribed to it. I don't know. I mean, if she still believes it, because it doesn't seem like it seems like it was mainly in the past, at least not mentioned recently. She hasn't campaigned recently, but so yeah, this is about her meeting Nancy about you know and just the drug war and such, and of course that had its origins in oppression. So I don't know, just contradictory people, I suppose one could say. You know, while on one hand, it doesn't seem like she did this movie eh, with any ulterior motives besides, depicting history. And it seems like it's mostly accurate. It's certainly more accurate than some historical movies I've watched recently, or even Asian movies that I've watched some months ago, like what was it called? Something Sky. I've also commented on. That was just absolute pure propaganda. It's obvious when it's pure propaganda when they change many historical facts and somehow still well received for some reason. That's the bizarre thing about movie-going audiences. Not all propaganda movies are generally well received. Like I've noticed, there's at least one Turkish movie that is recognized as being propaganda that is also badly received, or at least on IMDb, very lowly rated. But yeah, some others aren't at all. Anyway, so this one doesn't seem to be in that vein. This seems to be mostly historical, factual accounts of what happened. But all I'm saying is that she seems to have, at least in the past, at least, seems to have subscribed to this one facet of historical, at least, oppression. Yeah, I'm not sure why I said at least there. I mean, it might have begun like that, but it continues as well. So, no, but not at least, more like, yeah, it began there, but you know and I'm only saying that in context of what she intends to highlight here, which is obviously other accounts of oppression also. But, it's a bit hypocritical to go from this to, of course, this was before, so I don't know, as I said, if she changed her, but anyway, yeah, so that was, um, and I'm assuming African countries also imported anti-drug laws with which they persecute minorities, which is also, uh, the same sort of thing. But anyway, I mean, this movie wasn't at all about drugs generally, anyway. So one can easily separate that, So if it was, if there was something about it, and then maybe one could see it through that lens, and wonder whether she had um, a certain agenda or not. But anyway, it wasn't. So otherwise, it is mostly a factual movie, and the true account of this, what happened in reality was quite interesting. So yeah, I took it, as I said, more of a documentary. I could have seen a documentary, I suppose. Assuming some exist. Apparently, there's a movie from 1990 as well. Not sure how similar it is to this. It might have been based on a different account, possibly. So maybe slightly different. But yeah, it was though interesting. It was enlightening, I suppose one could say. And it's clearly an injustice perpetrated by both parties. Um, and it's a disappointment, really. Um, one other thing is that what's remarkable, and I've read a bit about the party that uh, this person founded. The name sounds a lot like karma, by the way. Yeah. So, so anyway, yeah, I read a bit about I think it's called Botswana Democratic Party, and it's quite remarkable. Apparently, I mean, it's been ruling since the 60s, and even up to this day, apparently, Botswana generally is considered to be one of the least corrupt African countries, and politically stable, apparently. And I've read about human rights abuses there, and well, relatively, it isn't that long. I mean, if you compare it with a country like Saudi Arabia, which is also ruled by, well, a monarch in this case, an absolute monarch. Um, in a way, though, I mean, I don't know if they officially abolished monarchy in Botswana, or it was like a superficial thing that they tried to do at the end of the protectorate. But no, it seems like something continued on anyway with regards to the chieftaincy. Regardless of what, though, clearly his family seems to still have a hold, considering, his son, I think, was the fourth president, current as well, I think. Apparently, though, the party split and such, although still has a majority. So yeah, what's strange is that though this party held the government for so long, and yet it remained stable somehow up to this day. This is an incredible amount of time. So it's nearly 55 years or so. That is a long time for a country to be stable with a single party. I really didn't think that was possible, honestly. So it's kind of strange. Though, what I think happened, though, is that the resources propped it up, the diamonds. Of course, it's supposed to. I think this might have been a case of but apparently the national government had at least a 50% share. Because apparently the mining company harvests the diamonds is still partially an international group, but many other instances, I think, in neighboring countries, they had either a total ownership or majority ownership, presumably, or such. This seems more equitable. Um, so surprised that they haven't taken over. I mean, apparently they nationalized even the beef industry somehow. You'd think they'd try to nationalize the diamond industry as well, considering it's clearly most profitable for them. So yeah, but yeah, if you compare to another country like Saudi Arabia, both have the death penalty, but clearly Saudi Arabia is much worse. I think haven't uh, haven't. I'm pretty sure it is worse, right? I mean, at least that's the perception. I haven't checked, double checked the statistics for now, but my perception is that it is worse. Botswana still has a death penalty, though, but apparently, on average, it's applied for about one person a year, which I'm pretty sure is not the case in Saudi Arabia. Um, so, I mean, I'm not sure if there's an objective measure for how how much how many human rights are contravened in comparison to other countries. Is there? There must be. I'm assuming. I'm not sure though. But overall, it doesn't seem to be. I mean, that there is an article on it, which there's also an article for many other countries as well. But I think generally they are larger for other countries. Um, yeah. So um, I don't know. Is it the fact that they have minerals, they have diamonds they could harvest that sustains them, that somehow makes them not go in the direction of dictatorship and such. And of course, minerals, resources generally can lead indeed to conflicts, and conflict leads to instability generally. Um, yeah, but somehow this this remains remarkably stable. Now, I don't know much more than this. I mean, I've only read a little bit about Botswana generally. I have read though the articles of all of these protagonists, so I mean I know that much at least up to independence. But then I read a bit also about, well, obviously, since I've read his biography, I also know how he managed the country after his election. Apparently, he was elected 4 times after, and he seems to have. So I mean, it might also be the fact that he began this, he as opposed to Robert Mugabe in neighboring Zimbabwe. I don't think. I mean, he might have begun relatively sane, then he didn't continue on as such. I think, although I don't know too much either about it, but that's the general impression. But this guy, on the other hand, seems to have done relatively well. Um, of course, I only know superficially, that is. So, by no means am I a historian about this or anything. But based on, yeah, well, seems like, this worked, So Botswana clearly, it seems, most likely, was more of a success case than Zimbabwe or even South Africa. I mean, this time, South Africa was quite corrupt, really, and I think it remained so until the 90s, at least. And even after that, there's still corruption. Zuma resigned recently for corruption generally, so this is the problem, really, I guess, unless if countries do not start off after independence, do not start off in an uncorrupt manner, then it is difficult to. Of course, South Africa still sort of started in a non-corrupt manner with Nelson Mandela, but yeah, I don't think he really. There were really many other people like him after. Whereas with this, I didn't read too much about the ones who came after him, the four other who came after him. But the country still remains seemingly stable, and it didn't seem like there was much corruption that I could read of. There are, as I said, these splits recently, but that happens in all parties in the world, really. So, but yeah, it 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 was revelatory, I suppose one could say. As I said, I watched it as a sort of documentary, but I do prefer. I got to say, I do prefer films like this instead of a documentary. 'Cause documentaries are sort of sterile in comparison to this. When it comes to films, yeah, it's like one is watching the real life version. It's remarkable how closely they resembled the real life versions. Apparently, even their own real son um, said that he thought they resembled his parents. But yeah, that was a bit strange because I thought she had a daughter. I'm not sure why they didn't just say, I mean, it seems like they had sons and stuff. Anyway, yeah. So apparently, there's only a couple of movies that use the language that is used in this film, by the way. Just a couple. This one and another movie called Tsotsi, which I've heard of but I haven't seen yet. That's not much, is it? Just a couple. I mean, this country has 2 million people, apparently, a bit over 2 million, 2,254,000. So yeah, so not much at all. In comparison to how big the country is, not much. Um, yeah, 2 million. Um, and yet, as I say, it's remained relatively stable in comparison to other countries. Because they could just like even and yeah, there is freedom in the world reports apparently, but yeah, I guess that's so. Of course, it's U.S. government funded, so yeah, you know what I mean. I wonder how much it rates. Do we probably anyway? So um, with a population of 2 million, though, yeah, one could I guess compare to others, and so like if I compare it to, as I mentioned, wait, there isn't even an article here. That's strange. And yeah, apparently, the equivalent to um, Alistair Canning mostly was Patrick Gordon Walker. I'm not sure why they didn't just name him. I mean, all the others had real life names mostly, and he really did seem to have done the thing where, and yeah, he wasn't a civil servant. I'm not sure why they made him civil servant. And I'm not sure if they did say. I don't think they did say explicitly in the film that he was a civil servant. Somehow it made it feel like it. But no, in real life, he was in fact a politician. Now, as to whether he was as arrogant as Davenport's character made him seem, but apparently he did tell him that he's banished in an unfeeling, cold, calculating manner. Apparently, Susan Williams' book suggests, it seems. Um, and what's strange is that this guy, Patrick Gordon Walker, was Labour's candidate for the Smartwick constituency, which of course in 64 had a quite, so on the 64 election really it had the worst of both worlds, I suppose. It's like, I mean, despite this happening, he actually wasn't the worst in that specific election. Um, yeah, but otherwise, and this was in the 50s. He was a so-called Commonwealth Secretary in 1950. I don't think that secretary exists anymore. Assume. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, um, for a party who's supposed to be more about social cohesion, at the very least, social, modern economics. Usually, I mean, more than some simple capitalism. It is disappointing for such a party to have really prioritized economics as opposed to, I mean, local economics. Botswana could have begun as a destabilized country because of this, but somehow things turned out relatively well, just relatively, and hmm, apparently, this guy was elected after his predecessor was killed in a car accident. Apparently, he held quite a lot of posts. Alfred Dobbs was the predecessor. One day he died. That's quite some misfortune. Shortest term as an MP after the Second World War, though. So what, was there someone before who was there for like half a day or a few hours? Like a second, maybe, like, yay, I'm an MP for 1 second. I shall resign now. I cannot possibly do anything. I just wanted to prove a point. Now I shall resign. Yeah. Frankly, I have no idea. I mean, just because they wanted to harvest gold from South Africa, this was, yeah. Um. So no, in this case, with the case of with the film In the Name of Our Father, that Irish incident there, I think the judiciary was more to blame, effectively, and somehow as well scientists who were convinced to fabricate evidence. With regards to this, though, it is almost exclusively more politicians, sure enough, and well, yeah, I mean, in most of these cases, generally the fact that people elect other people who do this, so unless one cannot really blame autocracy or any such so this is not a case of democracy being positive in both these cases here. These are people doing elected position, uh, uh, doing things in an elected capacity. With regards to the judiciary, I mean, it's slightly more nuanced, of course. Judiciary is still, I don't think, as opposed to the US, where, well, no, the law, actually, are they, I know the US votes for a lot of people, for a lot of positions. I don't think it votes for the judiciary. No, I think they're mostly appointed, so yeah, maybe they are mostly appointed in many countries. but well, they are appointed by people who are elected. So essentially, it is still democracy here to blame. So effectively, as the Irish incident case, effectively, democracy enabled um, people's deaths. No other way to go about it. So, in a sense, the Irish incident case was indeed more, well, I mean, as a generalized case, with regards to the Irish troubles, though, was more pernicious, affected many more people. Well, with regards to that specific case, though, it was more of an individual case. It affected quite a few people. But of course you could generalize it to the Irish troubles, which affected many, many more people. Of course, this here, this incident depicted in this movie affected, an entire country, not to the extent, of course, that it affected this individual relationship. Well, this relationship only had two people, so in this sense, it didn't affect. But it was more of an abstract thing as well, and it could have destabilized the country, but somehow it didn't. So quite remarkable how it didn't, honestly. Um, what's curious, though, surely, is how for all the bizarre lionization of Churchill, um, of course, this was post World War II, and he's mostly bizarrely idolized for World War II. Um, but for all of that, and even for all the negatives, some people do discuss the negatives sometimes, but I I hadn't personally ever heard of this specifically. That he just hypocritically did this specifically. So in this sense, the people were voting for nothing really. I mean, if some people thought that voting for him meant that so it was released, then yeah, the hypocrisy is really the lifeblood of politics, really. And yeah, hypocrisy really is basically the worst thing that can happen in politics. So I mean, it's one of those things. So it's more like a lifeblood thing rather than you know the absolute worst that can happen. It's more of a enabling factor, kind of like how blood enables life. Hypocrisy enables corruption. Uh, just it could potentially cost people's lives. It didn't in this case, but this could have enabled a civil war, which would have cost people's lives. I'm surprised they didn't. At one point they began throwing stuff at Tom Felton's character. I'm surprised it ended there. I mean, if it happened for real, I'm surprised they just threw stuff, and just left him to go and drive away. Yeah, ultimately, I just honestly, patience was exercised clearly, whereas the British government exercised hypocrisy pretty much. But yeah, otherwise, I mean, just it's one of those, it's kind of like I'm commenting on a documentary at this point. And I don't even normally comment on documentaries because they're just facts mainly. But yeah, it's interesting in a sense. Then I didn't per se enjoy it as a movie, in the sense that just enjoyed like I enjoyed. You've got mail and such, but it was interesting, and I learned stuff from it. Really, so it's better than non-documentary in this sense.